Okay, hi, Susan. So Susan is the clinical director of the Society for the Prevention of Teen Suicide. And she's going to be a shortened version of our Raising Resilient Teens parent presentation. And Susan, I know you said that you want to add a little bit more about introducing yourself, so take it away.
Um, First of all, can people see me? Because
Yes,
I can't see anybody else. Okay, great.
yeah, we can see you.
All right. Yeah, my name is Susan Talone, and I'm the clinical director with the Society for the Prevention of Teen Suicide. And I'm just really grateful to be here today to speak to you about the role of the trusted adult. I've been in suicide prevention. Honestly, it's probably been 38 years now, and I've worked in a variety of settings, and have worked in a school setting where I've seen the importance of that trusted adult, not only in a school setting, but in the community. So today I want to bring that experience with me to you and hopefully have a good dialogue in the next half hour about what it means to be a trusted adult. I'm going to share my screen. I have my colleague, Kyle Kalbach, is going to share the screen. Can you bring that up, Kyle? So let's just talk about, if parenting wasn't difficult enough before COVID, right? Here we are a year or so later, and the parenting challenges have become absolutely incredible. And I think for the first time, I have to say, parents are really have an appreciation of teachers and what we go through on a daily basis to work with children. And I know that in part of my um, experience, I spent 10 years in education as a school nurse, as a teacher, and oftentimes I didn't feel that parents really understood how difficult that role was, but they do now. So some of the challenges that we see in our youth, even before COVID, of course, is the questionable impact of social media, and also the complications of early puberty. That adolescent brain is underdeveloped, and it's underdeveloped till really doesn't fully develop to age 22, and I always say 24 in boys. But so we're dealing with a brain that is not processing the way an adult brain does, has ups and downs, can't always regulate emotions, and that is just the chemistry of the brain at that point in time. So it really presents challenges for us as parents and as school professionals, and also the escalating concerns about safety. I mean, besides COVID now, school shootings, there's just an enormous amount of concern about mental health issues right now, and rightfully so. We have seen an incredible amount of increase in anxiety and depression amongst our children in the last year. And even that 18 to 22-year-old who is trying to adjust to college has had an incredibly difficult time. And COVID, and I just want to say this to everyone today, I think it's really important to really be honest with each other. Everyone on this call has been under an enormous amount of stress and uncertainty for the past year, and everyone in our country is experiencing some type of mental health stress and uncertainty. And that chronic stress can take a real toll on all of us. Um, and the children that we're with, I just want to say that no generation has ever been challenged as this generation has in this pandemic. And that we really need to recognize the stress that our children have been under and really give them kudos for enduring and being resilient during this very, very difficult time. Okay. So one of the things that I'm with the Society for the Prevention of Teen Suicide. This has been my passion for years, and part of why I became passionate about this is after years of working with the police, emergency rooms, teaching at the University of Medicine and Dentistry, and working in Manasquan High School for 10 years that had one of the largest suicide contagions ever recorded in the country. I came to understand that there was so many myths about suicide that I really wanted to dispel. And one of the ones is, will talking about suicide plant the idea in someone's mind? This comes up all the time. And the truth of the matter is, no, it absolutely will not. If a child is feeling suicidal and someone brings this up, it is such a relief to them that finally someone is talking to them about something that they've been carrying around for a very long time. And if a child is not suicidal, they're not. So you can talk about it, but that's not going to create that sense that they want to take their lives. So that is a myth. Is suicide just a way of getting attention? Absolutely not. And if a child is speaking about suicide, and I hear this all the time, even during the suicide contagion at Manasquan, parents would say to me, they're just doing it for attention because they know that so many lives have been lost during this time frame. And I would say, if someone is talking about suicide for attention, somebody please give that child attention. There's something going on there that they need to talk that drastically for attention. Whatever it is, put aside some time and give that child attention. Okay. Is suicide just a normal part of adolescent drama? No, it is not. Is there adolescent drama? Absolutely. But is suicide part of that? Not normally. No. And don't most suicides happen without warning? And I can't tell you how many times I've been on a response that the family will have said to me, there were absolutely no signs, or the school would have said no signs. But as time goes on, oftentimes we are able to reflect back and say, yes, indeed, there were signs. We just didn't know what we were looking at. We just didn't realize. There are some suicides that happen without warning, uh, but more often there are warning signs. And don't suicidal people need to be in psychiatric hospitals? If they are unsafe and if they are at that point where they feel that they cannot be, trusted, or a professional believes that it's imminent, yes, they need to be hospitalized. But most times, we don't want to wait to stage 4, which is, at that critical state where they are absolutely imminent for suicidal completion. We want to get to them way earlier, stage 1 and 2, when they're feeling anxiety and depressed, and maybe having some suicidal ideation, but not that it's advanced to what I call stage 4. So we can get to them earlier on, and it's much easier to get them back to a healthy way of thinking if we intervene early. Okay. And one thing that I really want you to understand is, people always say to me, I don't understand suicide. Why would anyone want to die, take their own lives? And I really want you to think about this. Suicide is not a desire to end your biological existence. It is just simply is not. What it is an attempt to solve a problem that is creating intense emotional pain. You are in intense emotional pain, but you don't have the problem solving skills to manage that problem. And so there feels like there's no way out. So I think, when, as parents and school professionals, if we think about it not as a desire to die, but as as someone who's having intense emotional pain and can't figure out a way to solve this problem, isn't that what we do every day? Help kids solve problems. So maybe suicide prevention is something within our realm of expertise. We can help children solve problems. We can help them break it down so that it becomes something that they can manage. Okay. What problems seem, unsolvable to a child? Getting into trouble at school, home, with the law, that's very common. Being humiliated in front of friends, especially for boys. And boys can be tough on each other. And when I speak about that contagion in Manasquan, and we lost 12 students during 2008 and 2012, and 11 out of 12 were boys. And so boys can, be tough on each other. They have trouble oftentimes talking about their feelings. So we have to really keep an eye on our boys. Loss of a relationship, an opportunity, or a dream. And hasn't COVID really created that for our children? I mean, so many losses, proms, graduations, even the ability to go visit college is that's why that 18 to 22-year-old is having such a difficult time. Not only did they lose graduation and proms, but they lost their freshman year in college, what they had worked so hard for. And many kids are feeling very defeated and actually in deep despair over some of those losses. And any transition which a youth feels unprepared for can create a sense of a problem that seems unsolvable. So whenever you see a child transitioning, whether it's from eighth grade to ninth, or from high school to college, or even changing schools, or divorce can be a transition. Lots of different transitions can create a sense of unsolvable problems. Okay. Um, so, what does intense emotional pain look like? You know, if you ever think about one of the most difficult times of your entire life, if you ever were to, if I asked you to reflect right now on one of the most difficult moments or days of your entire life, I'm wondering if any of these words would resonate with you. Did you have a sense of emptiness? Were you confused? Did you feel um, possibly like a loser? Did you feel helpless, hopeless, worthless? And the bottom line is desperate. That last word on the slide, desperation. When you combine a sense of hopelessness and desperation, that's oftentimes those two key words that really combine that create that sense of intense emotional pain that I don't know if I can do this much longer. I don't know how much I can fight this feelings. They get exhausted. Okay. So at SPTS, Society for Prevention of Teen Suicide, we put the suicide risk factors and warning signs into a traffic light. And I like to think about it like green are those protective factors that keep you safe. If you're coming up to a green light and the light is green and you're kind of cruising through, you're not worried about things, things are going well. As the light turns yellow, those are the risk factors. You start to get a little hesitant. Things aren't quite right. Start to look around. Start to feel a little. Things are uh, getting a little worrisome. Should I gun it? Should I stop? And you get a little uneasy. And then the light turns red, and you absolutely have to stop. And those are the warning signs. So we can have protective factors. We have many of our children have risk factors. We have no idea what they are because we can't know everything that goes on in their lives, but we can see warning signs, and that's when we have to stop and really ask the question, are you okay? Okay. So those warning signs, we put it in an acronym called FACTS: feelings, actions, changes, threats, and situations. Those feelings are what I talked about earlier, that sense of worthlessness, hopelessness, feeling like a loser. The actions can be, kids start um, really engaging in higher risk behaviors. Sometimes we'll see an increase in alcohol or drugs at this point, change of friends, um, not necessarily caring about things that they used to care about, um, and 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 isolation or withdrawal. Changes, and I always say this to parents: nobody knows their kids better than you. But if you see a child's behavior change, and as educators, we're always looking for that baseline behavior, and then what changed, or did it change? So whenever you're noticing changes in your adolescence, stop and pause and ask them what's going on. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Even things like tattoos. I know when I was a school nurse, I would always, if I saw a new tattoo, because they were always coming in because they were infected or something, I would always say, oh, tell me about that tattoo. This is new for you. Tell me. Now, some kids tattoos because they love art. Other kids are making statements, but asking about changes. Threats, talk. Unfortunately, adolescents don't come up and say, geez, I'm feeling depressed, a little anxious, and I'm suicidal today. They don't say things like that. They say things like, I can't do this anymore. I wish I never existed. I've had enough. No one would notice. if I wasn't here. I just want to disappear. I am a burden to my family. I'm stressing everyone out. They say things like that. And situations, are anything that has created, as we talked about, stress in their lives. And it can be anything from sports to something going on at school, bullying, um, academic pressure, family issues. And again, COVID has brought so many difficult situations into our children's lives: financial stress, actual death, mourning, grief, uncertainty. And all of this that COVID has brought in has really created a sense of concern for those of us working with youth, because before COVID, suicide was the second leading cause of death amongst our youth. Before COVID. We were already in a public health crisis. So those of us who are in mental health are paying a lot of attention to what's happening now, and even more so as we emerge out of the pandemic. Who is left with a lot of stress and anxiety from all that they've been through. So, warning signs that you might recognize, expressions of emotional distress. Kids will be ups and downs, highs and lows, getting into trouble, changes in mood, changes in appetite. Some people lose their appetite. Many more people overeat to calm and soothe their emotions, withdrawing from activities and concerns expressed by peers. And if a child comes up to you about your own child or about any other child, stop what you're doing and listen. Kids know when their friends are in trouble. They absolutely know. They see it on weekends, they hear it, they see it on social media. They're catching what that child is really meaning behind what he's saying. So listen to the kids when they tell you they're worried about a friend. Um, and one thing I can say that, how do you know when to worry and when not to worry? Every adolescent will have ups and downs. Every child will have a bad day. We like to say, look at it in a 2 week period of time. If a child is staying in a bad mood for 2 weeks, is isolating and not interacting for 2 weeks, or really in a place of darkness for 2 weeks, that is not within the normal range of adolescence. So at that point, you should start to ask what's going on. Are you okay? So, what can you do? Recognizing those possible warning signs that we just identified, talking to your youth, listening to what they have to say, and knowing where to go for help. And that listening piece is the biggest part of being a trusted adult. And we're going to go into that in a few minutes. Okay. If you're really worried, if you have listened and you are worried, you have to act immediately. You've got to get that child to some kind of professional help for an assessment on where they're at in their thinking about taking their own lives. And that, so, you may listen to a child, you may get really concerned. Don't try to solve it yourself. Bring it to a professional and get that assessment. Okay. So people say to me all the time, how do I talk to kids about suicide? And one of the things that I say is that, we have to, kids do not have what we call an observing ego. They oftentimes do not see themselves the way we see them. They don't realize that they're changing, that they're not giving eye contact, that they're not smiling. And so you have to almost bring it to their attention. Um, so you could say something like this: Hey, Jessica, can I talk to you for a minute? I've been watching what's been going on with you over the last couple of weeks, and it's got me a little worried. Your play's gotten sloppy. I've heard you fighting with some of your teammates, and I caught some random talk about you saying you were going to kill yourself. What's going on? This would be more of a coach. And oftentimes, coaches are in the role of a trusted adult. And because they're not mental health professionals, but they're around these kids so much, they have to be able to call a child out and say, I'm worried about you. You're not yourself. Something's going on. Are you okay? And sometimes that child doesn't even realize that it's that obvious that something is going on. And how do you share with a parent, that you're worried about their child? And I have to say that this is one of the most difficult things um, to do, because as a parent, to hear that your child might be talking about suicide is clearly one of the most devastating things that any parent could ever hear. And we need to be cognizant of that. So, an example for a parent, it would be, hey, Mrs. B, I want to let you know I've had my eye on Jessica for the last couple of weeks, and she's just not acting like herself. Her play has gotten sloppy, and she's been fighting with some of the team members. Most concerning is the fact that some of the girls have had heard her talk about suicide. I want to let you know so you can take over from here. Now, sharing with a parent that you've heard this, um, anytime you talk to a parent, if you can get collateral information, if you're not the only one that's noticed this, if you've had other teachers or other coaches worried about this child as well, that helps in breaking news to a parent, because sometimes a parent will say, well, you just don't understand my child, or you don't like my child. But you can say, well, when in fact, I'm not the only one that's noticed this. And anytime you can give any more data to that conversation is going to help you. And it's really about aligning yourself as partners in the quest to get this child some help. I know that you, as a parent, have your child's best interest in mind. And I, as their coach or professional or community member, also has their best interest in mind. So together, let's see what we can do. Okay. So now we have asked kids, what does it mean to be a trusted adult? And I can just tell you, to the parents, many, many times children do not choose their parents as their trusted adults, not because they don't love you, but because they love you so much that they are protecting you from their own pain. It's too hard for them to tell you about their pain because they can see it reflected in your pain when you tell them that. So oftentimes kids will go to a coach, will go to an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, someone who's a little bit removed, and share. But when we ask kids, what about the person you would talk to makes you want to go to them, makes you want to go back to them, they say things like being non judgmental. That anything this child says is in a non judgmental zone, that they take me seriously, that they don't dismiss it with, oh, if the child was to tell you that they're, just really heartbroken over a breakup with a boy or a girl, that they take it seriously and they don't start with the cliches. Oh, there's many fish in the sea, or you're beautiful. Everyone will love you. You're young. They have to be taken seriously. This is a painful time for them. Not telling me it will be better tomorrow. And these, because as soon as you tell a child it'll be better tomorrow, they've heard that from other adults. They've heard that from other people that aren't really listening to what they're saying. So when you start with these cliches, don't worry, things will get better, it won't matter tomorrow, in a year from now. When you start saying things like that, they're saying they're not listening. They're not hearing that I'm in intense pain over this. And those relationships that our children go through in those breakups are truly heartbreaking for them. And they honestly believe that they will never love like that again. We lost a lot of kids during relationship breakups during that contagion. All right. So the trusted adult, listening, recognizing that you probably can't fix uh, what they're worried about, but just listening will really make the difference. Just listening without judgment. That's what they've told us. And being someone who takes action, that if they have told you something, and even if it's action that you have to get them help immediately, that you do so. There's a reason they're talking to you. They need someone to take action. And to be honest about that, if you think you have to tell someone else about the problem, and you can say things like, you know what, I care so much about you and you mean so much to me, but I'm a little bit, out of my realm of comfort. I'm not quite sure I know everything that Mrs. So and so, who works in guidance, knows. So let's walk down there together and talk with her. Remembering, the children have also said, remembering what we talked about and asking about it later. This is the most important piece about being a trusted adult, that follow up piece. If you do the warm handoff and you give them to a professional, please make sure that you round back with them the next day and say, you know what, you don't have to tell me everything that went on in that office, but I just want to make you, remind you that I'm still thinking about you and I hope you're okay. They may or may not talk to you at that point, but they're really noticed that you followed up. Um, and that's what this slide is talking about. If you're not sure you're the person to talk about this subject, just say, I may not be able to answer all this, but I know someone else who can. And your job as a trusted adult is really to connect that youth to a resource and knowing when to get that child help. Okay. So, as a trusted adult, your role is critical, but it's limited. So, you can, provide them with resources, such as the second floor youth helpline, the crisis text line. Kids will text 24 hours a day. There's a professional on the other end. If it's an immediate crisis, of course, you're going to call 911 and get, some kind of help. But when you think about being a trusted adult, it's not so much, don't put so much emphasis on suicide prevention as much as keeping this child safe. If you frame it in terms of safety, how is this child in jeopardy of not being safe from themselves? You would do anything to keep any child safe. So don't let the stigma of or shame of mental health and talking about mental health stop you from keeping a child safe. Okay. So bringing it all together, um, is, recognizing your role in helping children to help themselves. Part of building, and I'm sure this will be talked about with our next speaker, building children's strengths is getting them involved in the problem solving process themselves as much as possible, helping them to think through, partner with you as you try to help them solve this problem that seems insurmountable to them. And and remember, if a child comes to you for help, your first gut reaction is to jump in and fix it. That is not what they want. What they want is you to simply allow them to talk. All right, they want to talk, and you want to validate that whatever they're feeling, they have a right to that feeling, and just let it sit. I hear you. I understand you. Okay, what are we going to do together to move forward? And there's a little word, we. Um, you know, once a child, one of the main things of intense emotional pain is loneliness and isolation. But once you connect with that child and say, now that you've shared with me what you're going through, we are going to do something about it, they are no longer alone. That little word we is an adjoining word that can provide such hope during those moments. And if you don't know what to say when this child is telling you some things that it might be really hard to hear, just say three little words. Tell me more. Tell me more about that. That's really hard for me to hear, but I'm so glad you told me that. Tell me more. And those are words that kids don't hear. Adults, we launch into fixing it. They do not hear those three little words. Tell me more. And I'm so glad you shared it with me. And that takes bravery and courage to tell me these things. And I'm truly honored that you've shared this with me. And now that I know, we are going to do something about it. All right. So always reaching out for help when you're worried about this child. Okay. Um, and knowing, that kids will go to their cell phones for help. These helplines, I would always actually have a child call right in front of me, text right in front of me. Let's see what happens if we do text. Does anybody answer? Once you walk a child through the phone call or the text when you're there and show them that someone does answer, they'll do it again on their own, oftentimes in the middle of the night when they need it most. So giving kids linkage to professionals through these resources is a huge step in helping them get help. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is always there. And also on their phones, there's so many apps on their phones that calm, my three trusted adults, those kinds of things where they can really reach out for help. Okay. I think I have a few minutes for questions and answers. So if anybody has any questions, and or Kyle, if any questions have come in during my
Susan,
presentation.
we did get a question in the Q&A that asks, my niece is always on her phone and in her room. Is that a normal thing for a 13-year-old? To me, she seems like she's avoiding the family and she's angry a lot more.
Well, 13 years old, it is pretty typical that they're with their peers and on their phones at 13 years old, and they will begin to isolate. But I think it's important to ask the question and to say, hey, I can't help but notice you're in your room a lot, you're on the phone, and that's great. But are you okay? Is everything okay? Is there anything that you want to tell me about? Because I used to say it like this, this is a no judgment zone. And, coming from someone who truly cares about you, are you okay? Let me know. I'm here for you. And giving that child the option of talking. And even if they don't open up at that moment, they'll remember that you gave them and you were curious, and that matters to them. Okay. 13 is, it's a tough age, and but you do want to keep, that avenue of communication open. People think that adolescents don't want to talk to adults, but I have worked in high school long enough to know that they absolutely do need and want to talk to adults. They do. They will choose when they need you, they will come. But you've got to let them know that it's a no judgment zone and you're open to hearing whatever they have to say. Yeah.
Susan, how do we talk to our teens about the glamorization of mental health issues and self-harm on social media?
Oh, boy. Glamorization and glorification of self harm and suicide, and those are real issues that we're very concerned about. So I always talk about with kids helping them understand why they are dangerous. So I always say to them, we're careful about glamorization or glorification because there are children in the shadows that are looking at what happens if you take your own life, or what happens if you self-harm. And if you start giving that a lot of attention, they may think that they can be more recognized in death or through self harm than in life and healthy living. So we're actually doing exactly what we don't want to do. We're glorifying something, we're giving attention to something, an avenue that we don't want them walking down. So glorification and glamorization can happen with the best intentions, but can actually really backfire on us. And again, referencing that contagion in Manasquan, that is exactly what went on there. There was so much attention given to some of the suicides that kids actually started to see it as interesting, and something that, maybe they'll remember me in death more, or notice me in death more than life. And that's not good.
Any other questions, Kyle, you have?
I don't currently see any others, but I know a common question that we get all the time throughout our presentations, especially during the pandemic, is about increased usage of screen time, Susan. And the teens and adolescents seem to be using their screens and technology a lot more, during quarantine and during the pandemic. Is there any way we can, help with this or help reduce it? What are your suggestions?
We've talked about this, and through the pandemic, I have said to parents, lower your expectations, give them a little bit more breath when it comes to using their devices and social media, because really their developmental task is to connect with peers, and they're missing so many other opportunities to nurture that developmental task that those devices actually are helping them in some ways. Now, having said that, finding the balance is really important. And I think, again, having that open dialogue, saying, I'm giving you more time because I know you need it, but I also need you to participate a little bit more in some family activities. So, ask and getting their input into what those activities could look like, taking a walk, doing something as a group, getting involved in a television show or a game, something at home that brings them out a little bit. So you're like, I'm giving you this, but I'm also asking for this. So finding that cooperation between the two, I think is a great thing. But to recognize that most kids are on more and they may need it more.
So Susan, I just wanted, we're going to have to hold off on the questions. If there are further questions, put them in the chat and we will certainly get to our speakers and get the information to you. And we also want to just mention that we have Prevention Resource has a help app that is free on both Android and Apple. It has a lot of the same resources Susan talked about, has text lines, hotlines, and we're going to put that information in the chat as well. Right. So it's 10:40. Susan, thank you so much. It was a great presentation, really informative. Appreciate it very much. We're going to take a 5-minute break. We're going to be back here promptly at 10:45 for our next speaker. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.